The year is 2019. Donald Trump is about to lose his attempt at re-election. Lil Nas is a name that people actually care about. Prince Harry is about to have his first child, and Detective Pikachu and John Wick have just come out. Honestly, it feels like life is in a pretty good spot. Little did we know, something was lurking just around the corner. A seismic event that would change everything. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about fire design. Part 1. When is power creep? From May to October of 2019, Wizards of the Coast dropped 3 sets that shook Magic to its core. War of the Spark, Modern Horizons, and Throne of Eldraine. They were the heralds of the new age for Magic. And these sets weren't just successful, but they were wildly popular. But they also left players questioning, had Magic crossed a line? Was this the point where power creep went from a whisper to a scream? To define power creep, I'm going to be using War of the Spark as the turning point of Magic's design philosophy. Anything before War of the Spark, we'll call that the Boomer Magic era. And then anything after War of the Spark is going to be the power creep era. Part 2. What is power creep? Power creep has always been a hot topic among Magic players, sparking endless debates. Is it a necessary evolution to keep the game fresh, or is it a ticking time bomb destined to make older cards obsolete? Power creep is a term that gets thrown around by a lot of Magic players, usually with the same energy as someone yelling, "Get off my lawn!" The idea is that cards are becoming too strong, overshadowing the older staples. But when cards like Thoughtseize and the Shocklands are staples in any format that they're legal in, can we really say that these new cards are taking over the game? It's easy to look at Magic and its evolution over the years and think that this is really getting out of hand. But as Jordan Slavic so eloquently reminds us in his paper titled Power Creep and the Collapse of the Roman Republic, yeah, that's a real paper by a college professor. As he says, unbalanced systems are as old as history itself. If Rome couldn't withstand its own version of Oko Thief of Crowns, what hope does our beloved card game have? Within this self-proclaimed fire design era, Planeswalkers started behaving more like enchantments, and Hogak demanded the attention of multiple ban announcements, and Oko, well, Oko took balance out for lunch, turned it into an elk, and paid for it with your credit card. It was a complete design philosophy shift, a 180 from the previous Standard season where they were trying to make Standard less powerful. It was a completely new power curve for the game. And this means that cards like Tarmogoyf or Cryptic Command, which once dominated formats, are now overshadowed by newer, flashier options. Is power creep really taking over Magic? Or is it just some classic MTG overreaction? Part 3. Where is power creep? Let's start with Magic's most popular format, Commander. So if we look at EDHREC's top 100 most played cards, about 77% of them come from sets released before War of the Spark. I mean, that's a hefty majority. Now, there are some corner cases, like Smothering Tithe, for example, which came out literally the set right before War of the Spark. So there's probably a little bit of the same design philosophy in that card, but, I had to draw the line somewhere, so I drew it here. Deal with it, I guess. Now, I'll be the first to admit this data is not perfect. Older cards have had more time to circulate, and there's more old sets than there are new, but it still paints a picture. Commander isn't completely overtaken by power creep yet, but what about competitive formats? Modern, for instance, is practically a Modern Horizons showcase featuring the One Ring. The format's in such a rough spot, I'm not even going to bother digging any deeper. There's plenty of videos on the internet talking about how shitty Modern is right now. I mean, if you're looking for an example of how power creep can just push players away, Modern's your poster child. Some of the biggest Modern players and content creators are leaving the format, it's so bad. But I think a better format to actually look at for our analysis is Pioneer. It's perfect because it evenly splits between pre and post War of the Spark sets. There's 26 from before and 26 after. So basically what I did, I looked at all of the top 5 Pioneer decks that have been doing well in tournaments or events. All this data is from MTG Goldfish, by the way, and I broke it down into how many cards are from pre and post War of the Spark. Let's first look at Rakdos mid-range. This is a deck that typically just alters itself slightly to contain the flavor of the month, if you will. Right now, it's Demons, so I think this is a very interesting deck to look at. It's 62.1% power crept cards, 16 unique different cards, compared to 37.9% old cards with 8 unique cards. So it's literally double new cards as it is to old cards. But then you have Izzet Phoenix, which is probably one of the most popular decks in the format right now, featuring almost 60% old cards and 40% new cards. Now, 11 unique new cards compared to 10 unique old cards. So I'd say it's pretty close to 50-50. They're leaning a little bit towards old cards. And then Jund Sacrifice, which is a fairly new deck, just a new flavor of the Rakdos Sacrifice deck. The complete opposite almost. 72.5% power crept cards, 15 unique ones, and 27.5% old cards, 6 unique. Way more new cards than there are old cards in that deck. Azorius Control, another classic of the format, 22.3% old cards, only 4 old cards. I think like 2 of those are lands. So you really only have like 2 real old cards in this deck. 17 unique new cards. 77.7% of the deck is new cards. And then Lotus Field, one of the poster children of the Pioneer format. 42.4% new cards, 10. And then 57.6% is old cards. So again, pretty close to 50-50. Pioneer tells a much different story than Commander did. 3 of the top decks lean heavily on new cards, while the other 2 aren't that far behind. So what's going on? Are standard sets just getting stronger? Yeah. Part 4. Why is power creep? The most pessimistic among us will tell you that it's a part of a broken capitalist system that wants to force us to spread open our wallets and let WotC reach in and take out all of our hard-earned money. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is definitely part of the problem, but I think that there's much more to it than that. Sam Stoddard, a designer for Wizards of the Coast, wrote an article about power creep back in 2013. Notably, this is around the same time they would have been in the early stages for War of the Spark. Coincidence? Maybe. I don't know. But in this article, he made a point that I think gives a pretty fair reason for power creep. He said, the only way to actually prevent power creep would be to stop printing new cards altogether. And he goes on to say about how as we get more and more cards, it's more and more difficult to keep track of every design they've ever made and to prevent from stepping on the toes of old cards. And I mean, I agree with him. I don't think it's intrinsically a problem that we now have 11 better versions of Tormenting Voice. Also, wait, there's a card called Fast and Furious? Where was I? These are obviously less of an issue than the Nadus of the world that ruin formats. Power creep gives us a reason to stay invested in the game. Now when I build a deck, I can choose the Tormenting Voice variant that fits the theme of my deck the best. If I want to burn out my opponents, I can play Grab the Prize instead. Or if I have artifacts laying around that I don't mind sacrificing, I can play Demand Answers. These creeps allow for more flexibility in deck lists, even though there's no reason to play Tormenting Voice anymore. Part 5. How is power creep? Sure. Will power creep ruin Magic? Honestly, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to. Don't get me wrong, it's doing some serious damage to Modern and Legacy, sure. And for the 17 people that play those formats, I'm sorry. But other formats seem to be thriving. Pioneer and Standard are in a great place right now. They're fun, they're diverse. Pauper isn't completely overrun by overpowered new cards. So it's kind of like you're reliving the glory days of old Magic. And Commander, it's still a melting pot of old favorites and shiny new tools with tons of room for creativity. I also think that some of the recent sets have been doing power creep in a good way, making cards that are the best at what they do, but what they do is so niche that it won't see play in every deck that can run them. It gives people a card that can incite joy and bring back the excitement of what Magic used to be. Make you want to play with this card, build around it. And if you don't like it, you can just pretend it doesn't exist. It's not something you have to play to be the best of the best. Now, I think power creep is definitely something we need to keep an eye on and remain vocal about, but I'm going to trust Wizards of the Coast that they understand the risks and that they're going to be careful. I hope.